Warby and I will be presenting this. So I'm a VP of Product Management looking after our SD-WAN strategy. And Warby and I will be co-presenting.
Yeah, Warby Warburton, Director of Product Management. My focus area is Prisma Access Infrastructure. I'm going to have Koroush kick things off, and I'll come back later.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So to get going, how many people were in the session yesterday with SD-WAN? Just a show of hand. OK, so a few. Today we're going to be talking about the Prisma Access and how it complements our SD-WAN solution. In fact, it's actually the differentiator for our SD-WAN solution. So we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive. But I'm going to review some of the content from yesterday to not only reinforce, but there's new people here that haven't seen the pitch. I think that Nir and Lee did a fantastic job setting it up yesterday. Ignite is actually our launch event for SD-WAN, net new functionality for Pane OS. Much of what you're going to see on the Pane OS side is actually in beta right now for those of you that are participating in the beta program. And it should be available by end of this year in Pane OS 9.1.0. So that's our GA, targeted in December, maybe early January, but it's right around the corner. And much of the Prisma Access stuff is functional, but we'll be making a lot of enhancements about what you're going to be seeing today. So just to review the SD-WAN portion, this clicker is a little bit delayed. So all right. So what is driving SD-WAN, right? Why is SD-WAN popular all of a sudden? The main reasons is that applications are obviously moving to the cloud. That's SaaS and public cloud workloads that are companies have moved there. There is an aspect that these cloud workloads need more bandwidth, right, and high quality connectivity. And then there is the limitations that private connectivity like MPLS have, not only just in terms of bandwidth, but in terms of the way that the traffic gets to the cloud. So with SD-WAN, those problems are addressed. The first piece is that the user experience is improved. You get more bandwidth at those branches that need them, and you have this low latency, high quality connectivity, right? So that's the main benefit that made SD-WAN popular in the last couple of years, and it's a prime use case now for branch connectivity. And part of what people are trying to do is that once they're comfortable with SD-WAN, maybe when their MPLS contracts are expiring, they move away, maybe in a year or two. Like nobody's like canceling contracts right away. It's in a hybrid deployment today. Now, there's quite a bit of challenge with SD-WAN deployments. I'm not sure, maybe a show of hands of how many people are actually in an SD-WAN POC today, or have actually played around with SD-WAN with other competition. Okay, so after you see these challenges, and maybe I'll ask you again, how many of them resonate with your experience. So the first one is, three categories, right? I'm going to actually deep dive into most of these. So security, and security is in two aspects of branches are exposed to the internet now, whereas before it was private connectivity. So there's a security challenge we'll deep dive into. Performance is another part that SD-WAN is high performance, but it actually is not unless you actually do it right in an end-to-end fashion. I'll talk about that as well. And the third part is the complexity. And so initially, SD-WAN is simple. In fact, agility is one of the attributes of SD-WAN. But once you get going and you actually get to solve the security aspect, it becomes really complicated. And especially if you want to set up complex topologies, it makes your life very difficult. So these are, and so let's deep dive into why is SD-WAN difficult. And one of our differentiations coming into the SD-WAN space is to fix these challenges that are in the SD-WAN deployments. So the first part is about the networks before SD-WAN. So this is an example of a network where connectivity is through a private connection. The traffic is going to the firewall that you have at your data center. So connectivity is easy, security is easy. Each person has its own domain, but the traffic is taking the long way around. So the hairpinning effect where latency and bandwidth become an issue. When you introduce the SD-WAN into the mix, a few things fall apart, right? So one is that this normally you don't have a firewall at the branch location. and the management of the security is at your data center firewall. With SD-WAN, what happens is that the traffic now bypasses that firewall that was in place. So SD-WAN really drives security to the edge of the network. And for Palo Alto, that means that you need to put firewalls either as VMs or as hardware firewalls either on the edge or Prisma Access. So the top one is Prisma Access logo. So those are the two ways that people have been securing the branch. And for a Palo Alto customer, because most of the policies are in Panorama, it's much easier for the customer to take the same policies and push them down to the edge to keep the consistency of their security, right? So SD-WAN products or projects always become security projects after the POC is done, and then jointly with the security team, the company has to figure out how to solve the connectivity and security problem together. And these 4 different ways are what has been in play in the last couple of years, right? So the first one is easy. You put the 2 boxes of security and SD-WAN next to each other, plug them together. Problem is solved. If you have HA, then you got 4 boxes there. You got 2 different management systems. So to simplify that, some companies allow a VM to run on their platform to reduce the number of boxes, but you still have multiple management systems there and complexity. So then number 3, which is that UCPE model, became popular. So service providers take multiple VMs, put it on an x86. They take over the management, charge a bunch of money, and that's another way that the problem is solved. Now, number 4 with Prisma Access became very popular because it's the lowest number of boxes. You got 1 box at the branch, you got the security and connectivity in Prisma Access. Companies, our partner companies, for instance, CloudGenix and Silver Peak have this kind of a connectivity model with us today. So complementary solutions. We will continue to solve those problems, but from a customer perspective, it's 2 companies to deal with, 2 different management systems, and in HA especially, there's routing challenges. And in our session yesterday, so when those videos come out, in our session yesterday, we actually talked about the challenges of using a firewall with a product that is not integrated in, and with the zoning and things of that sort, not introducing a lot of complexity. So that's one aspect of complexity. The other one is that with SD-WAN solutions, it's easy to plug a box into the branch locations, have all the branches connecting to each other with this n-squared type of a problem. And so this is what we see a lot of people run into, is that branches start talking to each other, but then they reach some scalability challenges. Also, if you imagine this is offices around the world, the traffic really needs to traverse from one country and continent to another continent. And most of the time it works, but when it doesn't work, the troubleshooting of it is kind of difficult, right? 2 p.m. on a Friday, Zoom doesn't work. Maybe some circuits between, let's say, India and US is congested, and there is no way to fix that, right? Because you don't control the middle mile of that link. And so there are solutions. People come up with overlay fabrics, and again, that introduces another company into the mix that you need to buy service from and interconnect. So what happens is people start this way, but then they're like, well, that didn't quite work. So they set up these regional gateways. So that you set up a gateway for a particular country, maybe in the US, 2, 3 regional gateways, East Coast, West Coast. Everybody home runs there. Then you buy high quality connectivity between those hubs, pay good amount of money. Actually, I've been looking at circuits. They cost something like $50 per megabit per second just to connect sites together per month, right? These are actually, in my mind, it was quite expensive. So a lot of the cost of SD-WAN, even though it may reduce cost, it actually increases cost. So in this world, nothing is really for free, as I've noticed as you dig in. So this hub and spoke, we do recommend the hub and spoke, but there's just the complexities that you see on the screen. But this is the ultimate topology that everybody will end up using. The other aspect that I mentioned in the middle mile. So this slide basically shows a branch on the left side going to traffic on the right side. And you see that normally you have one link, it goes to a service provider, then a lot of things can happen along the way. So if the service provider itself is congested, a lot of congestion happens at peering points between two different service providers, and some service providers even have congestion internally to their systems. So with SD-WAN, you can have multiple circuits, so you can add a second service provider. What SD-WAN will do is we'll figure out which of the two service providers provides a better service level requirement, and we'll pick the best one. That's called first mile SD-WAN, so the first segment, which is which one do you pick. But then even if you pick these two, if there is a congestion in the middle between two different service providers, it doesn't solve this problem. So then what you end up needing to do is buy this high quality bypass, which is called the middle mile. So a lot of companies are in the middle mile. Equinix, for instance, is one. You can actually buy a platform and buy the middle mile fabric. And what happens is the traffic now goes from the ISP through this middle mile directly to the destination or back down to your data center. So the ultimate destination that most people end up in is this kind of a solution to get an end-to-end SD-WAN experience. All right, so these are all the complexities with SD-WAN that I think it's good to be aware of. I'm going to hand it off to Warby to talk about Prisma Access attributes, and we'll come back and kind of put the two together, which is the topic of this session. Warby?
Thank you, Koroush. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Prisma Access. I'll do a quick overview. Hopefully, most of you have been to some of the sessions this week on it, and it's not new for you. If you didn't make it, they are recorded and they will be posted. But basically, the idea is that we have this Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, that you've been hearing about. We talked about it on the main stage on Tuesday, or Wednesday, rather. The idea is that you have both the networking piece provided as a service and the security piece converged into one solution. A lot of companies are really good at one or the other. One of them they do really well, the other one's an afterthought, something that they bolt on. They're maybe really good at the networking piece, and then through an acquisition or minimal effort, they add some security, but it's not true security, or vice versa. SASE combines those both, and Prisma Access, as you heard during the keynote, delivers on all those components. So it has a network service layer and a security service layer delivered from the cloud. So it's one integrated solution, getting all the functionality. You have branch or retail locations, you have mobile users, they're coming into the security, the network layer, they get the security applied in the cloud, and then they go on to their destination. SaaS, internet, could be company-hosted applications in the public cloud or company-hosted applications in their own data center. So digging into the pieces of these layers, at the networking layer, the users are connecting over VPNs, could be IPsec, could be SSL. We have Prisma Access, we have the GP client, we also have clientless VPN for mobile users. We use IPsec VPNs for sites today. And we can do QoS, policy-based forwarding, so all the traditional network services to get all the users, all the sites all over the world connected to a local, regional instance of Prisma Access. So getting the users there quickly without the hairpinning we talked about earlier. And then once they're there, we do all of our next generation security, all the enforcement, everything that you got on your traditional enterprise home run security stack you can get in the cloud. We do this all over the world. So just over 100 locations. In our release in August, we expanded to be multi-cloud delivered. So we went from what was 15 locations to a little over 100 in 76 countries. So chances are your users or your branch locations are somewhere very close to where the service is hosted. Very minimal latency, high throughput. Get the users to the application quickly. We've done testing internally, and we found that in some cases, using Prisma Access for a user to go to a SaaS application is actually faster than going directly over the internet. So normally, you add security, you slow things down, and you get blamed for a bad user experience. In this case, we actually, in some cases, have improved it because the clouds we're running on, like AWS and Google, has such good infrastructure. it's better than going through multiple ISPs to get to a SaaS application. So we literally can speed things up in some cases. So in the branch and retail location example, on the left is what the traditional solution that Koroush mentioned, branch connections over something like MPLS, going back to headquarters. So they get their private hosted application access, which is a good thing, but they're also having to go back to get to a SaaS application. Most SaaS applications are hosted and cached worldwide, and this hairpinning slows things down significantly, especially if the headquarters is on another continent. On the right-hand side, the cloud in the center is Prisma Access. So the branch location connects to that instance. It can take Prisma Access to the data center, so you still have access to your private hosted applications. But if it's just going to a SaaS application or the internet, it'll take you there directly. It won't bring you all the way back and then go out. So not only is the latency much lower, but it's also a local experience. So if you're sitting in an office, let's say in Barcelona, and your headquarters happen to be in, I don't know, Japan, if the user did like a search online, they would get results from a different location than where they're physically at, depending on their browser and the settings and how they're recognized. But in this case, it's actually local. They're going to go to the internet. They're going to be dropped off back with a local experience. So it's very important. So this works very well. The onboarding can be a little bit challenging. If you had many, many sites and you have to build IPsec tunnels, if you've ever built an IPsec tunnel, you know there's a lot of opportunities to make a mistake. You can do things with scripting. We have some third-party SD-WAN vendors, like Koroush mentioned, that have done a lot of work, like Silver Peak, CloudGenix, Viptela. They do a good job integrating with Prisma Access, but it's still a second pane of glass. So you still have to manage all of those devices independent of Prisma Access. And if you need local segmentation, so maybe you have many subnets in a medium-sized branch location, maybe there's guest Wi-Fi and IoT and employees. If it's retail, there's point of sale. With a lower-end routing device, you can put those in separate VLANs and just have them not talk to each other, but you may actually want to have some traffic allowed with full control. So now you have to, like Koroush mentioned earlier, you have to add a security stack back on top of that for local segmentation. Or you have to bring it to Prisma Access and back, which is okay because you're not hairpinning back to corporate, but you're still hairpinning out of the branch just to do local traffic. So it's not ideal, depends on the application. So what this session is all about is how do we solve the middle mile problem of SD-WAN and some of these onboarding challenges of Prisma Access, so you probably know where this is going. But before we get there, apologies if this isn't familiar, but I'm going to take you through a really corny example from my childhood. So this is a screenshot from a YouTube video that was ripped from a VHS tape. That's why the quality is so terrible. The guy here is dressed in really nice 70s attire, and he's carrying a chocolate bar. It's not me. And this young lady is carrying a jar of peanut butter. Anyone know where this is going? Oh, boy. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So this is a really corny commercial. I know it was popular in the US. I don't know about here. But they're walking towards each other around a blind corner. They run into each other. And his chocolate, you got your chocolate in my peanut butter. You got peanut butter in my chocolate. And then, Reese's peanut butter cups, right? So maybe this doesn't play well in Europe. I don't know if this commercial ran here or if you're old enough to know this. But this is the whole Better Together story that Reese's kind of had as their marketing pitch for a couple decades. It's a really funny commercial. It's very corny. But the idea is that we have these options, and they have their pros and cons that Koroush talked about, but now we're introducing a fifth option, which is a next-gen firewall, so a Pane OS firewall, sitting at a branch or a retail location with SD-WAN functionality connecting to Prisma Access. So we get the onboarding benefits of SD-WAN, and we get the middle mile advantages of Prisma Access, and all with a single pane of glass. That's the better together story. So Prisma Access becomes the middle mile. It is the intelligent cloud that connects all these SD-WAN locations. One pane of glass, all managed from Panorama. So Panorama is managing the devices at the locations. It's managing Prisma Access. You now have security inside the branch locations as well as across the cloud. And it's easy to consume. So because Prisma Access has the cloud intelligence, we can give you that good connectivity, low latency, get you to your application as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. And we can control over time, maybe it's on this cloud, maybe it's on that one, maybe it's this location. As the clouds expand, we add more compute, things just keep getting better. And it's worldwide on those 76 countries, 100 plus locations. So I'm going to bring Koroush back up, and I'll return for the Q&A.
Thanks, Warby. All right. So we're going to put all this together now. So we got Prisma Access. We're going to talk about the SD-WAN portion. After yesterday's session, a lot of people came up and actually were very enthusiastic about the differentiated way of having single company provide the entire solution from end to end. So that is actually, the difference between all the SD-WAN solutions that you see, where it's a do-it-yourself solution that it gets hosted somewhere else. In our case, you have the option of do-it-yourself, and you have the option of getting this as a service. So we're going to talk about the SD-WAN capabilities, again, review from yesterday. But one of the things is that when we were building this, and this project didn't start that long ago. It actually started earlier this year, maybe in February is when we kicked it off. And so less than a year before it goes from concept to being available as a GA. And we were saying, OK, how do we, everybody is asking Palo Alto to do SD-WAN, right? In August, or in Austin Ignite in the US, people in the audience were saying, why didn't you guys just build your own SD-WAN, right? And the question that initially we had to deal with is, do we go buy a company? What do we actually do to build SD-WAN? And it turns out that PAN-OS actually does much of the functions that an SD-WAN product does. In fact, it does all the hard functions. Build the IPsec tunnels, digs inside applications. Many of the customers that I've talked to use PAN-OS next to an SD-WAN because of its custom app decodes, right? Many large companies have written their own custom apps. Off-the-shelf app decodes don't do custom apps. So the combination of very high-quality app decodes plus custom apps plus app cache, putting all this together is actually one of the fundamental pieces that an SD-WAN product needs to do. The pieces that we really needed to add was basically the path metrics, right? We needed to figure out what these path quality is, be able to use the metrics in making that initial path selection, but also continuously monitor such that we can make the change in path dynamically. And that's basically led to these 3 additional features that is in PAN-OS 9.1. So the first one is on these overlay tunnels, we are able to probe the other end and measure the delay and essentially path quality. We can use this to combine it with the previously available features on a per application basis, such that in the Zoom example, for instance, you can say, take Zoom, as long as all of these paths meet this particular service level requirement, let the Zoom application go through. If one of those paths is not usable, then switch it. So that's the third one, is the dynamic path change. So if you imagine the left link is being used, and those are packets, packet 1, 2, 3 goes on to the left link, and for a period of time that link is not usable, then the system can detect that in a sub-second fashion and flip it over to the next best link that meets the requirements. And it can keep it there until the session ends, or it can move it back to the original one if in case that the second one is LTE and you're paying for the bytes. So you have the choice of keeping the sessions or moving them back. And we put quite a bit of intelligence so we don't yank all the sessions back and then all of a sudden we congest the first link again. So we selectively adjust to make sure we are really balancing the traffic. And These are all the things that, in a way, we are late to SD-WAN, but then we're not making all the mistakes that other people have made. So that's kind of advantage of being late. The other one is, the other point is that this bookended, the reason I mentioned that is that, SD-WAN, for all of this to take place and be able to move traffic back and forth, you need the other end to be intelligent as well. And that other end, in the case of Prisma Access, is Prisma Access, right? So because Prisma Access runs Pane OS, the two pieces actually are coordinated together, and they talk to each other. And that's one of the challenges is, since SD-WAN is not a standard, you can't just take somebody else's SD-WAN and bookend it with another person. So there's this advantage of having both ends be the same vendor. This other aspect of single pane of glass management, so you use Panorama for security. The same workflow applies for SD-WAN. So you see the new pane that has been added for SD-WAN. You can configure the service level requirements. You can attach it to the same applications that you are used to for security. So the same palette of applications is available on the SD-WAN side. And it also provides a topology creator as well for next generation firewalls that we are going to be extending such that you can coordinate hardware and Prisma Access tunnel configuration. So that's a work in progress. It's not available yet, but we're going to make that easier as well. The other aspect that we've added in, actually we're working on, so it's not available yet, but we are adding in, is a zero-touch provisioning. So this is where you take a hardware firewall, you can ship it to a store at some geography, and the box, a brand new box, can boot up, connect to our zero-touch provisioning redirector. We are using our customer support portal to map your boxes that you purchased to your account and your Panorama, such that we can redirect brand new boxes to Panorama for automatic configuration. So there's a zero-touch provisioning feature that Palo Alto is going to be introducing. And there's going to be new hardware SKUs with a -ZTP at the end that will have this behavior out of the box. So when you order them, you can tell which one will have a ZTP behavior versus the normal boxes. So all of the PA220, PA800 series, et cetera, will have the new SKU for zero-touch provisioning around end of February or so. Okay? And we come back and open it up for Q&A in case there's questions there. All right. Let me switch to a little bit of topology, because I think this is where the value of Prisma Access becomes very clear. So these three are Gartner categories for SD-WAN topology. The middle one basically being the regional deployment. So if you got a country and you got maybe 50 locations, they say 500, but really after 50, you shouldn't be doing that, where you connect all of the sites together. So that's called regional. Global is that if you have 2 or more continents and you're going across the globe and you want to connect, let's say, Shanghai to New York, so you want predictable global user experience and predictable flow. So those are the two aspects. But then distributed enterprise falls into its own category because there's just a lot of sites. So scale is an issue and ease of use is an issue. And that becomes those 3 categories. If I was going to map them to how SD-WAN is deployed, so we talked about the challenges of the meshing sites together, right? It's complex, it doesn't scale, and it has the middle mile challenge. So the hub and spoke is what most people do. We do support hub and spoke, where you can deploy our VM or our hardware in regional locations and put the hubs either in your own data centers or get Equinix and interconnect them. So that's the do-it-yourself. It's supported. But with Prisma Access, right, that complexity goes away. We manage the infrastructure for you. So you get hub, you get interconnect, you get security, and you get last mile performant connectivity to SaaS and major public cloud applications, plus the mobility of the users that was already part of it with GP client. So you get all of these 5 together with Prisma Access. So as an example, if you have a site, let's say in Chile, and you got multiple ISP links, they go to the closest POP. There's actually one in Santiago. So it goes over a performant backbone from there to the closest compute. That's where the SD-WAN hub is. So from a hub, it picks the best link out of these tunnels. and then it can take it across the globe, let's say to Shanghai, and drop it onto the service connection that you're already familiar with. So you get first mile, middle mile, and last mile all with a predictable user experience. This is actually how we got there. So if you go from where people started out with mesh, right? So mesh is easy, it doesn't have a hub, it's the lowest number of points, but again, we already talked about that. So most people then end up in this hub and spoke topology, which actually scales pretty nice. So hybrid mesh is basically a hub and spoke, and you just connect all of the meshes together. It's also called a two-tier. And that's the same topology that Prisma Access has. So you can either build this yourself or use Prisma Access, and in terms of topology, it's exactly the same way. And so you get all of the benefits of simplicity, security, scalability. And so scalability is actually the other piece, is that if you have 3,000 retail locations, I've done many deployments with 10,000 plus retail locations, and the scale of connecting so many tunnels into a single hub actually is another challenge. So one challenge is geographic scale, the other one is just the density scale. And both of those require you to provision the links, buy enough bandwidth. When you use Prisma Access, because it is in the cloud, it just scales horizontally to address those challenges. So today, or by the end of this calendar year, the middle two, which are the do-it-yourself, are available. The Prisma Access portion is also usable. The management piece, which is the easy out-of-box one-click configuration, that's targeted for maybe about 4 or 5 months from now, but it is usable from a data path perspective, just to make sure that I set the expectation of availability. All right, so if you take the connectivity of enterprises, you have the branches, you have your traditional MPLS, and with SD-WAN, you can get the DIA circuits, and again, you need another place to terminate that. So in this case, you have this co-location hub that it terminates in. This is one state that most people are in after they've deployed SD-WAN. With Prisma Access, you can basically bring all of those tunnels into Prisma Access, so they come together, and then they can go back out to the destinations. And once the customers are comfortable with this, then they can wean off the MPLS maybe in a few years' time. So the end state can be this. You can even get rid of the top one as you move your workloads into public cloud, so it just becomes this single fabric that's very simple to manage, scalable, secure. And that's really what we are announcing here as our value proposition, and it's really unique in this industry and differentiated. So the 3 things that I just wanted to leave you with, if somebody, at the end of all of this, what are the 3 things? So it's basically consistency of industry-leading security. Palo Alto is the number one vendor. It's that end-to-end high-performance fabric that we just talked about. And it's that simplicity to consume all of this without having to go and buy all the different pieces and assemble it together, and even have the challenges of not having a service provider that can globally provide this to you. So it's a global fabric, so anywhere in the world you can actually use this solution. All right, so that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for your time. We're going to take some questions after this with Warby. Thank you.
All right, any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So with the next Gen Firewall at the branch location, is it possible to break out to the internet at the branch now? Or is it through the SaaS?
Yeah, so the question was, if we have the next generation firewall at the branch, can we do local breakout to the internet, or is it required to go to Prisma Access? So the answer is, it's not required. It depends on how that's sized. It could be that you want to do a different type of inspection for the SaaS app versus within the branch, or you could size that next generation firewall that does everything, and you just use the Prisma Access for the middle mile and for getting to your own data center. So it's up to you. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, so it depends on the amount of traffic. So if you are, let's say, a retail shop that doesn't have guest Wi-Fi and such, and everything naturally home runs out to your data center or workloads, then the DIA may not be needed, right? Some people say, maybe I have some specific applications that I want to just whitelist, maybe Netflix or Apple updates or something like that. YouTube, those kinds of high traffic workloads that you don't want to carry through Prisma Access. One of the advantages there is that you can just buy an NGFW with no security subscriptions. It just, all the subscription is done on Prisma Access. But if you need to do URL filtering locally, or east-west segmentation is the other piece. So if as a retail, if you want to separate the point of sale from other pieces, and you need the NGFW, then you also need the licenses at the edge as well. Here you go.
You are not a telecom company. Today, how you make sure that critical traffic is well transported into Prisma Cloud between different regions?
How do we ensure availability between the regions?
How do you make sure that critical traffic, for instance, if we have voice traffic between two regions, we go for the first mile to Prisma Access,
Yes.
then into Prisma Cloud? Do you take advantage of DHCP tagging, for instance? How do you make sure that traffic is well transported into Prisma Cloud?
Yeah, so for example, all the compute that we run on Google's network, it's all premium tier. The average throughput is double what a standard tier is for them or for other vendors. And they provide their own dedicated fiber. They don't use third-party ISPs or anything like that. And so we monitor congestion and things like that between all of our points. We don't today dynamically route or prioritize within the cloud. We anticipate that over time, as the service grows, we will need to be more intelligent as we are within the cloud. So far, customers are doing things like Zoom and VoIP and everything with no issues. But yes, it's something we're thinking about. We probably will get to the point and the scale where we have to start doing some prioritization within the cloud itself. Absolutely.
So today you rely more on bandwidth into
Yes.
the cloud.
Yeah, there is no congestion today to need
Yeah.
those types of information and prioritizations.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. More questions? Everybody eager to leave? Yes? No?
There's one back here.
Okay. No, there's no specific devices that we are announcing yet. Actually, I would say that's a good news because you can use the existing shipping PA220 all the way to the whole family today. We are working on next-gen hardware, but it is not a special SD-WAN device. It's a next-generation firewall with SD-WAN capabilities as part of Pane OS, as available in hardware or as part of our VM family, and you can use the combination of the two. To just add more to that, when we build our next generation devices, we're going to be adding a few more capabilities to make it much more suitable for as a branch gateway. The people have been asking, let's say, for more ports or other types of things. We're cognizant of that, and please do ask the folks that you're in contact with to bubble up the needs and kind of the customers that you have. So that we take that into account as we build these new boxes. Awesome. Any other questions? No? All right. I thank you for your time. We'll be here to answer some questions one-on-one. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Bye now.
Thank you.